Hello friends and strangers on the internet. Oh, it's a beautiful day today, guys. Really absolutely stunning. As you can see, I haven't even got a jacket on today. Let me just show you the view over the fjord here in Norway. As usual, I'm walking down to my studio. When the weather's like this, you can't drive, can you? You've got to walk, you've got to make the most of the weather. And you know, people in Norway, I've lived here for it's coming up to 24 years. So I've learned a lot about the Norwegian people. I moved here from the UK. And the weather for the Norwegian people is a big thing, especially this summer, because the winters are long, and they're hard, a lot of snow and ice, low temperatures. You've got to dig away the snow every single day in the winter. It's hard work. So when the when the summer comes, they treat it like gold or diamonds. So for me to drive down to my studio in my car would be seen like a sin or something. So I have to make the most. Of course, it's mostly downhill. The problem is, when I'm walking back to my home, it's uphill. But I suppose it's good for my heart. So today, I wanted to talk about, it's difficult to say. It's a tricky one. So you see, when I moved here from, like 24 years ago, I didn't know anybody. I had no friends. And one of the things I really missed was talking to my friends about art. I'm an artist myself. All my friends from university, they became, they worked in the graphic industry. They were illustrators, photographers, calligraphers, that kind of thing. All of them were creative. And, we would have hours and hours talking about what is art, what's good art, what's bad art, new theories about art. So I really missed that. There was nobody here in my village, here in Western Norway, that I knew to talk to about art. So I kind of frustrated. Now I could have phoned them, and I do phone them now and again. It's much easier today with the internet. But to phone England back then was a fortune, It was something like £1.2 million a minute. Of course I'm exaggerating, but it is well known. I think it's well known that Norway is a very expensive country. And I'm going to do some videos about that, why Norway is expensive. So stay tuned. But today I wanted to talk about how I made a good friend here who was an artist, and his name was Jonas. And I met him. I think I'd been in Norway for 2 years, maybe 3 years. I can't quite remember. But he, I used to run a small gallery here in my village. I don't anymore. I sold it off a couple of years ago. I just have a studio now. Most of my work I sell to private collectors and ordinary people, that kind of thing. I don't really need a gallery. So anyway, when I ran this gallery, one day this guy walks in and he's looking at me paintings, and I had like a double take, because he looked like Orson Welles. I don't know if people know who Orson Welles, you can look him up on Google, but it was when he was much older and overweight. And he really did look like Orson Welles. It was like astonishing. Did he have a beard then? I can't remember, but anyway, you know, Orson Welles also had he was a big guy, you know, but he had a big personality as well. And this guy, I started speaking to him, and it was clear that he also had a big personality.
Mr. Wells, you make Wimpy look skimpy.
Well, you see, I'm fat and you're ugly, but I can diet.
I think I'm going to lock up early.
So he introduced himself as Jonas. Now, I've never been someone who can connect with people easily. With Jonas, that happened actually instantly, because, you know, he had a really great personality and a great sense of humour, and I just, you know, he had me laughing in like seconds, and I knew that we were going to get on. So I kind of, you know, we went around, and I didn't have many paintings at that time. I was still kind of working on like a new style, trying things out. So I didn't really have many there. Just like small ones, really, sort of sketches on the wall. So we didn't really get to see the kind of work I was doing. Now, Jonas is what we would say was a successful artist. Now, back then, I had never really sort of questioned what exactly is a successful artist. And if you think that we are in we live in a capitalist system, so if you go by that kind of thing, capitalism, then a successful artist is someone who sells a lot. You know, they're very successful in selling, and their paintings sell for high prices. So in a capitalist system, that's what makes an artist successful. So I want you to keep that in mind. And his paintings sold well, and they sold for high prices. Now, I didn't know this at the time, so bear that in mind. Just let me give you the view here, guys. Really, really warm. Just fantastic weather. Beautiful weather today. You know, it's when it's like this that I feel grateful that I live in such a beautiful place in the world. I'm so grateful for that. You know, he kept coming back to this village here because it's kind of like, it is like a touristy village where I live. And he'd come back every year. And one of the reasons why he'd come back is because he had a cabin nearby. It's about 3 miles away from this village. Now, what are you talking about, Arthur? It's more like 10 miles. But that's nothing in Norway. So he has this cabin, and it's like alongside the fjord, and he uses that as a studio. And so he, in the way in Norway they call it hytte, 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 which is a cabin in the mountains or alongside the fjord. So he had one of those, and he invited me to kind of like come there So he actually picked me up in his car. He had a very, very expensive car, and he drove me to this cabin, and he had a beautiful balcony that overlooked the fjord, and his wife made us cakes and coffee, and it was just beautiful. I was a bit envious, I must say. And we were laughing and talking about art, and then he said, you need to come to Oslo to see my studio there. And I said, of course, I'd love to. Now, he took me into his little studio in his cabin. It wasn't very big, and he had a work in progress, so you couldn't really see exactly what he was doing from that. So bear that in mind. And he, so about a year later, he invited me to Oslo, and I stayed with him for a couple of days. Now his house was it was big. It was really big, and it was in a wealthy area of Oslo. Now I wouldn't say he was a millionaire. He wasn't of that kind of income, but he certainly was earning a good living, maybe that of a lawyer, maybe, or something like that. So anyway, I stayed with him for a couple of days, and the first day he took me up to on the third floor of his house. He'd made a studio, and he took me up there, and from an artist's perspective, that studio was to die for. I was really, really envious. I mean, it was just, it was to die for. I've never had a studio like that. I've had to paint in garages and all sorts of things, small spaces under my stairs. So it was to die for. Have a look at this view, guys. The two ferries have just passed each other again. I think it's too far away for you to see. And so he wanted me to, give him some feedback on his latest work. He actually originally created handles for knives, would you believe? And then he got into art. So, like I say, he didn't have a traditional art background. But what he did tell me was that he'd made friends, I think who was actually a neighbour in his neighbourhood, who was a famous artist in Norway. Now, don't ask me who that was, because, for me, Norwegian names are hard to remember. I'm getting better at remembering Norwegian names. We tend to remember names from our own culture, don't we? So I can't remember that. And he said, this artist? And I said, sorry, I don't. So I don't remember the name of this famous artist in Norway. Oh, look there. I can just see that there's some people bathing down there at the hotel. So, anyway, he didn't have this traditional background in art education, and this famous artist had, in a way, guided him a little bit. He would visit him every now and again, show him his paintings, and he would guide him. So that was his background. So I started looking through his paintings. Now, you've got to realise, guys, I went to art school at age 16, straight from school, and I was very lucky. I realise now that I was very, very lucky to have really excellent teachers. I didn't know it at the time, but I do now. And those teachers taught me and my fellow students that art is a sacred thing. And when I mean that you must never ever lie about it. Now, no one can define art, but there's a spirit to it in a way. And that education is deep in my DNA, and that's not, it's not, to some people might, there's a lot of people today that don't like establishment education, and I think that's not right. That's, what should I do? Bin my entire education from these brilliant teachers? No, I won't. That's my life. What makes your life better than my perspective? Anyway, I'm diversing here. So he didn't have that kind of background. So art is a sacred thing for me. I never ever lie about it, ever. I'll give my true view, and that's my perspective, and I have a right to that. What I meant was, when I say that art was sacred, is that I was going to tell the truth to him. I wasn't going to lie. I wasn't. There's a saying in Norway that says "snakke etter munnen," which translates to talking after the mouth, and that means that when you when you speak to someone, you speak your truth to them, rather than you say things to please them in order to gain favour. And I've always been like that, but what I didn't know was that if you do that in Norway, then you get a lot of respect. You get respect for that you don't talk after the mouth. So that's what I was going to do with Jonas. I was going to tell him the truth. And I did. So after that, we went downstairs and we went out into his garden. It was a beautiful summer day, like it is today. And, we had like a cold beer and some sandwiches his wife made, and we talked about art. And he asked me, what do you think about my work? So, this was a delicate thing, because, how can I put it? They were technically very good. From what I could see of his paintings, he certainly understood colour, he understood tonal values, the technique was flawless, so he'd developed a technique. And so he'd certainly learned a lot, really, from that famous artist guy. But there was something missing. Now, the best way I can describe them is they were abstract, right? So there was no particular image there. But the colours he used were like that of an old painting from, like, what would I say, like Rembrandt or something, like these dark browns, dark reds, blacks, dark, like chromium yellow, that kind of thing. So imagine like a Rembrandt painting, and then you made it into an abstract using those colours. So it had the effect of looking at an old painting, although it was like a modern style abstract, and that was what was different about them, and that's what impressed me. But there was something missing. There was no meaning in them. There was meaningless. It was just random. So I said to Jonas about this. There was no meaning in them. And he said, "You're absolutely right, Arthur. There's no meaning in them. That's exactly what I want. I want them to be just random. This pure random." he was like smiling and he was proud of it. And I thought, okay. But you see, if there's no meaning in your paintings, then they are meaningless, aren't they? Hi Toril. Hi. Har du varit på handel?
Ja,
Har du handlat idag?
ja,
Ja.
hej.
Ja, hej. Går det bra med dig?
Ja,
Ja, så vi ses nästa vecka.
vecka.
Ja. Ha det gott. God helg där. So, anyway, that was that. And I said to Jonas, for me, I have to put meaning into them. There has to be a meaning there, has to be a message there. And he didn't want any message. He said, well, the viewer can look at the painting and put a message in there themselves. They can interpret it themselves. That was his perspective, and I respected that. So the next day, it turns out that Jonas had an exhibition on in Oslo. So he took me there to see that, and it was a really big place. I mean, it was like huge. I mean, I don't know how many paintings he had in there, but it had to be in the 20s, maybe 22, 23 paintings. And, they were they were fairly big, And I was really impressed, and I thought, God, this guy has a big output of work, because I would say for every one painting that I do, Jonas did maybe 10 or 5 or 10 or something. My work takes a long time, and I'm not slow, although I'm slower now that I'm older, but I am a bit slower. But anyway, I'm looking through these paintings, and because there's no meaning there, they're just patterns. You see what I mean? They're clever patterns. So for me, they were a clever product. And this is what I told Jonas. I said, your paintings, in my opinion, are an advanced, clever art product. And he just smiled and said, I think you've hit it on the nail on the head, Arthur. That's exactly what they are. So there I am in this huge gallery with Jonas, and I remember the owner was there, and Jonas said, this is my friend Arthur, he's also an artist, he's staying with me at the moment, and I've brought him to see the exhibition. And I do remember that gallery owner was not really too interested in talking to me. He just said, I'm very busy, I'll have to leave you to it. So he left. And about 5 minutes after that, some guy came in, and it looked like he was, how can I put it? He looked like he was interested in buying, he was a buyer. And there was one particular painting that had caught his eye, and this was quite a big painting. If I remember, it was like 2.5 meters by 3. It was big. It caught his attention, and I thought I'll go over and talk to the guy, see if I can help Jonas sell one. So I goes over to this guy, and I couldn't speak a word of Norwegian in those days. I was still learning, so I spoke English to him, and he probably thought I was a tourist or something. So I said, yeah, that's one of my favourite paintings. I said, I like that painting as well. And he looked at me and he said, yeah, I kind of like this bit here. It's really funny. And how can I explain it? See, you've got to understand that the way Jonas created his paintings, he would do massive random techniques, drawing things, splashing things, and he would mask things off with tape or glue and then paint over them, and then when it was dry he would pull the tape off and it would leave areas, you see, like of blue or red underneath. And by chance on this particular painting it had created the shape of what looked like a little boy having a pea. So he's like sort of holding his pea, his little, and it even had the line like that. So it was almost like in a comic drawing of a boy. It wasn't quite perfect, but you could see I could see what this guy could see. It was like a little boy having a pea, and he thought it was funny. So anyway, this guy, I gets talking to him, and I'm saying, aren't the colours good? Now you've got to realise that, I've been in the world of art pretty much all my life, and so I've sold to just the ordinary guy on the street and some serious art collectors and people who are interested in art, and you get to know, like an art collector, somebody who's really genuinely an art collector. They're interested in art, aren't they? So they read about art, and they read, especially if they're into collecting one particular artist, they'll know all about them. They know how to speak to gallery owners and stuff like. You can just tell within a couple of minutes if somebody's an art collector or they're just art interested, or if just an ordinary person off the street who's decided to come in and have a look. So you can pretty much tell. And this guy was definitely not an art collector. And anyway, he says that I'm interested, I want to buy one. And he said, I like this one. So he said, do you think that he intended to do this like shape of a boy having a pea? And I said, I don't know, but the artist is over there, you can ask him. So he looked over, and Jonas has stood there, and he'd been listening. And he looked a bit uncomfortable. And I got the impression that Jonas was not used to talking directly to customers. I don't know, but he didn't seem to like being asked this question. So so anyway, Jonas comes over, and he left about a 10 feet gap between us. And the guy says to Jonas, "Is it true? Did you intend to do this like this boy having a pea?" Because he says, if it's true, he said, I really love it, because I'm after buying a painting for my hütte, his cabin. So it turns out that he had a cabin in the mountains, and he'd restored the cabin, and now he wanted to have a painting in the cabin. Now you've got to realise, guys, that art is sacred for me, but for the Norwegian people, these hütte, these cabins, are sacred to them. They're like holy places or something. So what he wanted to do was buy a painting for his cabin, and it turned out that he was saying to Jonas, he said, if it is like this boy having a pea, it would be great, because it would be a conversation piece when I invited friends and family over. I can say, have a look at this, because it was funny. So anyway, Jonas was there, and he didn't look comfortable at all. And he said, did you? Is it intended? And eventually Jonas replied, he said, no, I didn't intend that. It's purely random. He said, but if you want it to mean that, that's fine with me. So the guy said, so you didn't intend that? And Jonas just shook his head like that. So then the guy goes over to another painting which is next to it, and he goes like this. He just looks quick like that, goes like that. Then he comes over to the back to the painting again. He looks at the boy having a pee, and then he says, "I'll have a think about it." So he said, "I'll be back," and then he left. Now I got the impression that Jonas was not happy with this interaction. Anyway, we about 5 or 10 minutes after that, we left the gallery, and we went and had lunch somewhere in a cafe. And this cafe was like an art type cafe because it had art books and art prints all over the walls. I can't remember the name of that cafe, but anyway, after that, Jonas drove him back to his house. We had evening meal, which is nice. And then the next morning, I said goodbye, thanked him for everything, and then headed back home in my car. On my way back home now. Done a day's work in my studio. So anyway, I didn't see him for a couple of years, and he came back to this village because he had an invitation to have an exhibition here, and it was the same art society that I ended up coming here all those years ago. And he had an exhibition at this local gallery, which is run by the Art Society. See, I'm getting out of breath. It's all uphill. You can't see how steep this hill is, guys. Yeah, so let's say it was the late July of 2007. Jonas was having an exhibition at the gallery that's run by the Art Society here in my village. It's a really nice gallery actually. And anyway, he came into my gallery to invite me to that opening of his exhibition, which of course I was going to go to. And by now, I'd done 2 paintings, I think. I think I'd done 2 fairly big-sized paintings. Because each of my paintings take me about a year to do, because they're so detailed, I'm a freak for detail, guys. I really am. I love detail. My grandmother used to say that God was in the detail. Some say devil's in the detail, don't they? So my paintings are very calculated. I work them out before I even start, do loads of sketches. And then they have several layers to them. Oh, gosh. Okay, starting to flatten out here now. It was a bit up there. So anyway, and there was one painting in particular I was really proud of. It was one of the best I've ever done. And when I came into my gallery, Jonas was there looking at this particular painting. It was the last one I'd just finished. And he was just like standing there, staring at it. And I came up to him and said, "Hi, Jonas, good to see you." And he said, "This painting, Arthur, it's absolutely fabulous." And I said, "Thanks, I'm pretty proud of it myself. It's like the new style I'm working on. It's got a few new techniques in there." And he said, "Well, he looked at me, right, and he had this expression on his face that's really hard to put words to. Like he'd seen a ghost, and he was sweating. And I said, 'Jonas, are you all right? You don't look good.' Because he did have, You know, he took tablets for high blood pressure, so I was a bit concerned. And he said, "No, I'm all right, Arthur. It's this painting of yours that's kind of, you know, it's knocked me for six," he said. And he said, "There's something different about it," he said. It's like it's living. It's like it's alive." He said, how do you do that? And you see, he was beginning to see that, you see, I'd put meaning in the picture. And he says, how do you do that? How do you get it to breathe like that? And I said, "Jonas, you're not going to like the answer." And he says, "What?" I said, "It's because I put a piece of my soul in there. You know, which is why I say to people, every painting I do takes a piece out of me. You know, and it's. I think this is why I have a limited amount of paintings in me, because, you know, I don't know how much I can give of myself when I put these things." And I was explaining to Jonas, like, you know, I said, the thing is, you see, my paintings are like my children. You know, they're created to live on their own. So I was telling Jonas this. I said, "Look, when I was at art school, we was taught this, you know, I was taught this by my teacher, that a painting has to stand for itself. Because, you see, if your paintings don't have meaning, then they're meaningless and they're simply a product. And if it's a product, then at some point it loses its usage as a product and it's thrown away." Now, if you imagine those, I don't know if you've seen them in like furniture stores. Sometimes they sell these paintings. I don't know where they've been made, you know, but they're like manufactured in a way. And these paintings are sold in a way because the colours go with your sofa. So when you buy a sofa and you say, "Oh, that painting goes really well with my sofa," but there's no meaning with it. The meaning is that it makes your sofa look good. So what happens when you use your sofa and you want to change your sofa? Well, you throw the painting away. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that painting is a product. See, so I said, when I'm dead and gone, Jonas, I want my paintings to carry on. I want them to keep on saying what they're made to say, you know, the message they're meant to give. And also it's a kind of a capsule of the time that I lived in. And I said, so, you know, your paintings, by your own description, are meaningless, whereas mine are full of meaning. And therefore, I am very, very selective of who I sell those paintings to. And I mean, I get offers on my work, but I say no. If I don't like the person, or if they don't really love the painting, if for them it's just a painting, then I don't sell it to them. It makes my life very hard, financially wise. But if somebody really loves the painting, I can see it on them, then I sell it to them, because I know that they will love that painting in the way that I love. Like, I have a daughter and I love my daughter unconditionally. And in a way, my paintings are like that. So I want someone to, in a way, care for them. You know, Mark Rothko talked about this. And he's so right. What did he say? It's a cruel act to send your paintings out into the world. So I said, the only way that you can get your paintings to breathe like that is to put something of yourself in them. I said, so you see, when I sell a painting, I go through a period of missing them. And often when someone buys one of my paintings, I always insist to have like a bit of time to say goodbye to them. Or if they don't sell for a while, then I gradually have to move away from them so I can sell them. So this painting in particular, he kind of was captured by it because he hadn't seen anything like it. And it was upsetting him. And he said to me, and I'll never forget what he said. He said, Arthur, I have painted maybe like 1,000 or more paintings. And if I had painted just one like this painting that you have done, then I would have felt that I have achieved something with my work. But I haven't. None of my paintings mean anything. You see, he could just sell them like they were nothing, couldn't he? He couldn't remember a single painting he'd done because they was a product. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's still art, but it's in a kind of advanced product. It's a sophisticated product, I said, but my work isn't like that. And it's a choice. I said, when I was at art school, they said, you've got to decide what kind of artist you want to be. Do you want to just kind of sell and make money or earn a living? Or do you want to paint so that maybe you'll be remembered in history? And I decided, well, I'm going to do art. I might as well go for the full thing. And that's been my life, really. And it's a hard choice, guys. It's a hard choice. You might as well, why don't you just get a job and live easy? Because I don't know what's going to happen to me painting, but I have to make them so that they live for themselves. So anyway, Jonas didn't look good. Nej, det är greit det. Ska bara gå, tusen tack. It's my neighbour asking me if I want to lift up there because it's so steep. I'm going to do a story about that guy there. Now, I don't know if you just caught sight of his car there. I shouldn't really film his car. But you see like it was an old banger. And yet he's a millionaire, that guy, and he drives a banger. And there's a reason why the millionaires drive bangers. It's a really interesting story. So he's my neighbour, he's a multi-millionaire. And he was asking me, do you want to lift up there? Because he knows how steep it is. So I said, no, it's okay. It's good for my health. So anyway, back to Jonas. So I said, listen, Jonas, your opening of your exhibition is like in 10 minutes time. You better get yourself ready. So he said, yeah, of course. So you come in. I said, yeah, I'll be there. So jump ahead 15 minutes. He's up in the gallery. It's full of people. And the leader of the Arts Association does like a little, like an introduction to Jonas and his work. And there's a woman, in her introduction of Jonas, she says he's one of the most successful artists in Norway. See what I mean? And she meant, and she said, and he sells and loads of work. And that's kind of, you see what I mean? And that was true, he did, he sold loads. And so then she says, I'm not going to say anything about his work. I'll let the artist himself tell what his work is about. And I thought, aha, that's an interesting question. What will Jonas say about that? So anyway, he comes up to the microphone and he's standing there. And again, he's like sweating, and it seemed like ages before he could speak, actually. Let me get breath back, guys. You can have a look at the view while I'm getting my breath back. So he says then, like, I mean, he was getting a bit kind of stressed because he weren't talking and everyone was waiting for him to start talking. You know, when there's a silence, it feels like ages, doesn't it? And finally, he smiles and he says, it's true, I do sell. Last year I sold something like 100 and something paintings. And he says, I don't know why my paintings are so popular, but people seem to like them and they buy them. So you see, he didn't actually say anything about what his paintings mean because they didn't mean anything. So you see, what they are pieces of advanced decoration. And you see, that's the thing, that when I was at art school and university, and if you ask some of the great artists like Francis Bacon, for example, he talked about this, and Mark Rothko in particular, he said, just have a look at this view, guys. Mark Rothko said, like, it's the worst thing that your paintings can be is seen as a piece of decoration, because they will be seen like a painting that goes with your sofa, which means that at some point when you're dead and gone, they'll be thrown in the trash. And that is like the fear, I would say, of every artist. If you want your paintings to mean something and say something and give something to the world. Oh, by the way, anyway, I snuck out, and I don't know if he sold a lot, I'm sure he did. And that's kind of like the end of the first part, because I need there's a second half to this, but it's getting too long, so I'm going to do part two. Just want to show you this before I finish. So here in Norway, the post doesn't come through your door. They have like these boxes like this. See, the post comes here, and then you walk to here and you pick up your post. And it kind of shows you, you see, that how crime is so low here, that nobody ever steals your post. Otherwise it'd go through your door, wouldn't it? So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to start the story then in part two of this story of Jonas, because he had, it's not like a life existential crisis, but it was like a crisis about his paintings. What did they actually mean? He sort of was questioning. It was like questioning, why did I do it? You know, if it's only money, yeah. So, you know, once You get all that money, what then? I'm sure that's what he thought. And I don't know, and there's a reason why I don't know, and that can be in part 2. So I'm going to leave it there, guys. Hope I set some thoughts. And till next time, take care, give care, and be careful out there. And don't be strangers. And visit me again on this channel.